What's going on, y'all? Welcome to the second edition of the TFB Mailbag. So we're about a week in the camp. Today is Monday, or actually as I post this, today is Tuesday, August 11th. It's my son's birthday, my oldest son's birthday. Happy birthday to my son, Braylon. The Longhorns, if I'm not mistaken, today's Tuesday the 11th. They should have been in full pads for the first time today. So make sure to tap in on the website. I'll have an update on those guys by the end of the week, okay? So without further ado, let's go ahead and let's get into this week's mailbag, okay? We'll start off with my guy, Crash Dumby, all right? He asks, what is a potential weakness on offense and defense that no one is talking about? Often what we predict in the preseason doesn't work out. Much has been said about the O-line and secondary. What's a liability that we don't see on paper? First of all, that's a good question. I believe something that has not, so people believe the quote unquote weaknesses of this team are potentially the offensive line and the secondary. Something that's not getting talked about that concerns me, I wouldn't say concerns me, but wouldn't shock me if it comes up during the season. Outside of Colin Simmons, who we all agree is going to be a top 10 pick next spring, if Colin's not providing the pass rush from Texas, where is it coming from? Who is it coming from without them having to sacrifice fewer guys in coverage to bring the rush? So I think something that could come up that we're not really talking about is potentially the pass rush, not necessarily putting up the numbers or being as effective as we may anticipate. But that's just, that's me grasping for straws. Offensively, what's something that maybe could not work out that we're talking about? To me, it's got to be discipline. We've talked about the red zone issues that Texas has had, but just discipline. Throughout Coach Sarkisian's tenure, it's been the little things, and the little things have been the difference between this program competing for a national championship and being a team that makes it to the Final Four and doesn't make it like they have twice over the past several years. So I believe those are two things we can look at and potentially not necessarily worry about, but keep an eye on that could pop up during the season that isn't necessarily getting a lot of pub or talk right now. The next question comes from my man Slaughton. He asks, what does the two deep offensive line look like? And will we have a back that goes over the 1,000-yard mark? So I'll start with the last question. Will Texas have a back that goes over 1,000 yards? I think the answer is yes. I think that guy's going to be Hollywood Smothers. As far as the two deep goes, you all know the left tackle is Trevor Gooseby. Left guard is to be decided. The center will be Connor Robertson. The right guard will be Brandon Baker. And the right tackle will be Melvin Siani. I'm of the opinion that your first offensive tackle off the bench this season will be redshirt freshman Jordan Coleman. And I believe that's on the left side or the right side. I think Coleman is going to be that swing tackle, if he doesn't wind up being a guy that's potentially maybe used at left guard, right? I believe your backup left guard is likely going to be whoever doesn't win the battle between Sikorsky, Seymour, and Hudson. And speaking of Hudson, I think Hudson is going to for sure be your backup center. And then the guards can be, again, interchangeable between Sikorsky, Seymour, and Hudson. Also, a guy that may factor into that could be Andre Kojo, who I know has been working at guard and tackle as well. I remember Kojo coming out of Mansfield Timberview, huge kid, and he's a better athlete than you might think. So I think Kojo is the backup right guard. Coleman's your swing tackle, and Cole Hudson is for sure going to be your backup center. All right, the next question comes from my man, Mark in Austin. What's up, Mark? Nothing but love, Mark. One of my day one guys, Mark. All right, so Mark is saying, he's asking, he's talking about Texas State. He's got a question about Texas State quarterback Brad Jackson and the threat that he provides as a dual threat quarterback. And he's asking, could Texas State or Mr. Brad Jackson in particular, could that be a problem for Texas in game one? I believe, Mark, what are our definitions of a problem, right? Do I believe Texas State is a threat in game one against the Longhorns? No. And I say this as a guy that was present back in, the summer of 2010? For those of y'all, if you know, you know, but summer 2010, the Texas Longhorns scrimmaged the Texas State Bobcats 7-on-7 in the bubble. And if you heard rumors about how that went, I can confirm those rumors. I don't believe the 2026 version of the Texas Longhorns are going to have any problems with this year's Texas State Bobcats. Now, Texas State gets to start the season in Austin against UT right up the street. You better believe they're gonna empty the clip. All right, they're practicing everything, any and everything. This is the biggest game in a long time for them. At the same time, Texas is simply too good, too talented. They're gonna overwhelm Texas State in the trenches on both sides of the football. Just over the course of 60 minutes, I don't see that. I don't see Texas State as a viable threat. But Brad Jackson's a good player, and Texas State should make some noise out in the new Pac-12. So shouts out to is that G.J. Kinney, that's the head coach there. Wish them the best, but they're not going to be a real threat to Texas, in my opinion. All right, so my man T. Fonzie wants to know. He's asking about Oklahoma, okay, the Sooners. He wants to know, why is Oklahoma considered the number one defense in college football heading into this season? Okay, so obviously the guys I work with, my TFB guys, the guys that brought me into this profession are OU guys. Of course, Ryan Broyles is the one that started TFB, so I'm familiar with the Sooners and what they've got going on. You got to understand, first of all, just like Steve Sarkisian is considered an offensive guru, Brent Venables is a hell of a defensive coach, and that is his defense going into year, what's this got to be now, 4 or 5 up in Norman. I don't think it should be a surprise to anyone that OU's defense is the strength of their team. That's a good defense, man. I think their secondary may be slightly overhyped, but that defensive line is the real deal. That front seven is the real deal. But at the same time, as you all have seen in Dallas the last 2 years, it doesn't matter how good their defense is unless that defense is going to score some points for them too. But I threw a little jab there, but Oklahoma's defense is legit, big dog. I wouldn't sleep on the Sooners defense. All right, so moving on, my man D.E. Horn. He wants to know, is it reasonable to expect a national championship from this year's team? Yes, D.E. Denver Horn, absolutely, big dog. So again, this season, I think it's national championship or bust for the Longhorns. That is the expectations. That's the goal. That's the bar that's been set. They're not shying away from that, and I don't think you guys as fans should either. He wants to know if they are. Is it reasonable? If they are going to win the championship, why? It comes back to talent, man. Texas, on paper, I would say there's maybe 1 or 2 teams in the country on paper that can match up. And if Arch Manning, and I'm saying if, I know what I believe, but if that guy is, who we know him to be, I just don't see how they don't make a run this year. If Texas does not make a national championship run, I'm assuming that's barring injury, something catastrophic happening to Arch or anything like that. I think it could be something as simple as just the schedule, man. Texas, take a look at that schedule. It's a gauntlet, and there are no weeks off. So I just can see this team maybe being nicked up, banged up, and you never want to limp into, the postseason. But I could potentially, not making any excuses, I could potentially see that as something that's an issue later on. Just getting through the season, the SEC grind, and just having all your bullets in the chamber, for those college football playoff games. I could see that potentially being an issue. At the same time, this team has so much depth, pretty much at every position, outside of arguably the offensive line and proven depth in the secondary. There aren't a lot of excuses, y'all. All right. I have a recruiting question, one more from my man D.E. Horn, and then I got my man Czar to close things out. D.E. Horn was asking about Eastern Roy and his recruitment. All right. Is it good news the longer it plays out? And am I still expecting it to be LSU? All right. The fact that he's committed to Texas, and when you pull him up, it still says committed, that's the best news you can hope for as a Texas coach, as a Texas supporter. That's the best news. He's still committed. I just have a hard time come December seeing that kid, not stay home. But, different things have happened. This is the NIL era. I hope, he makes it to Austin. I think he's a day one starter, instant impact kind of guy. He's that kind of talent. But I expect the kid to end up at LSU 4 months from now. I'm just being honest with you all. And lastly, my man Czar, he says, and it's a great question. He said, I feel like you don't hear much about Sark having a coaching tree. Is that accurate? And if so, why? That's a great point. I would say you have to give Sark credit, or you don't have to, but Stan Drayton did leave this staff and become a head coach at Temple. But other than that, on the offensive side, you make a pretty good point. And when it's different for everybody, right? If you ask Nick Saban about, the last decade of his coaching career, I'm sure he'll probably tell you it got pretty freaking exhausting, man, having to replace double-digit coaches every single offseason, because you're happy to see guys, move on and progress and get promotions. But what happens is they're going to pillage the young guys you have coming up as well. And I could just see that being a thing. I don't know Sark's coaching tree intricately. At the same time, he strikes me as a guy, the guys he wants around him, he's the guy running the show, right, offensively. I don't see there being a ton of opportunities for guys to necessarily grow under that. Like, Sark's the type of coach you want guys that they kind of want to be stars in their role. They want to be there. That's what makes it work offensively for him and how he does things, right? I just think the way his coaching style doesn't necessarily lend itself to guys, going off and doing different things. But, I mean, technically, Brennan Marion did coach here at Texas for a little bit, right? So maybe, but no, it's a great question. And the truth is, without knowing, the details of everything, for every coach is just a little bit different. And honestly, if I, was a head coach, it's not something I've ever desired to do, but I would, man, continuity goes a long way. And I would, I think I would probably lean towards being a coach that I want my guys around me, my guys that want to be here too. At the same time, you're not knocking guys for being ambitious, for having, goals, or wanting to be, wanting to run their own program too. I think stuff has to, in the hiring process, what you're looking for. I don't think Coach Sarkisian necessarily is looking for guys that are trying to keep working their way up and get out of here after, a year or two. That's just not what he's looking for at this stage of what's going on. So I don't think it's necessarily a negative. It's just not how he wants to run things. And, things work differently for different people. But thank you all for this week. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to tap in on TFB Texas. We've got a lot of stuff still going on this week. Updates constantly coming. I appreciate you all. Until next time.